was a welfare baby. My family was on welfare when I was growing up. And the funny thing is, I didn't know it. I didn't know I was on welfare until I got in school and kids let me know I was on welfare.
Welcome to the Happy and Healed Money Podcast, brought to you every week with your girl, Star Carter. Don't forget to like and subscribe and cut on your notifications. That way you never miss out on brand new content that's coming to you every week. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into today's topic.
Welcome, my friends and family, to the very first episode of the Happy and Healed Money Podcast. We are here, January 2025. I am so grateful that you are here with me on this new journey. I just released the trailer for the new podcast, so if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I will link that show in the description, letting you know what we're going to be talking about here on the Happy and Healed Money Podcast. So I don't want to delay because this one may tend to go a little longer than my normal videos. You know, that's kind of like how podcasts do, so I don't want to waste time with a lot of fillers. But make sure you guys are liking this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and also make sure that you cut on your notifications, okay? So we're going to start off this year with the very first episode, and all future episodes, we're going to say the Serenity Prayer, because we're going to be diving so deep that we're going to need to be prayed up to make sure that we are covered when we're talking about some of these deep issues that is surrounding our finances, that's surrounding our money. So I want to make sure that we are covering ourselves, and we're just going to do it with a simple Serenity Prayer. So I know you all have heard of the Serenity Prayer, but if you haven't, I'm going to pull it up on the screen for us to say it together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right, guys. So, I did a call to action in the very first trailer episode of the podcast, asking you to fill out the form to be a guest on the show, a special guest on the show, to tell your money story. And I can't ask you to tell your money story if I won't tell anything about my own money story. Now, I've done videos on my channel before about my money story, but I never talked about my childhood. So let's go back. Let's go way back. Like Blackstreet said, let's go way back and back into time and give y'all a little bit backstory about Star Carter, the girl that y'all have been following here on YouTube since 2022, and give y'all some context of why I am so passionate about finances, because I didn't come from a family in which a bunch of you are viewers and listeners of this podcast will be able to relate. I didn't come from a family of money. I was a welfare baby. My family was on welfare when I was growing up. And the funny thing is, I didn't know it. I didn't know I was on welfare until I got in school and kids let me know I was on welfare, So got to give y'all some backstory. So I am from Baltimore. You probably can't tell because I am so country now. I've been living in South Carolina since I was 11 going on 12. And so, and I've only been back home maybe twice since we moved here. Like, I don't get to go back as often as I really would like to. The majority of my family moved to South Carolina as well. And so other than to just visit the city itself, I really don't have but maybe 2 cousins there that's left. So everybody else is here. Here in South Carolina with me. When my grandmother decided that she wanted to move here, this was her hometown. This is where she grew up and raised. And so everybody just packed up, and when we all left and came together. And so that was 1990 when we moved here. I went to Roland Park Elementary School. So shout out to Roland Park Elementary. And my brother, who is 7 years older than me, he we caught the buses. I remember catching the number 8, transferring to the number 13, and then catching the 44 that would take us right in front of the school. So I remember that. And some of my best memories was growing up in Baltimore. But like I said, I did not know that we were poor until school, until seeing what other kids have, because my grandmother who raised me, now my mother, okay, let me backtrack. So my mom stayed in the house with us. Like, we all lived together. Like, it was my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins. Like, we were a whole bunch of us. It was like 8, 9 of us in one row house. Now, my fondest memory was we lived off York Road, I'm sorry, and the country coming at me now. We lived off York Road in some apartments off of back on Winston Avenue, and I want to say it was a 2-bedroom apartment. And forever, guys, I thought that everybody had their bed in the living room. So because me and my grandmother, our bed was in the living room. We slept in the bed in the living room, and my mother and my stepdad, they slept in the bed in the den. And my aunt and my 2 cousins, they had a bedroom, and my uncle had a bedroom. And I even talked to my brother not too long ago, and I asked him, like, I don't remember you being there, but I know you were there. And he said he slept on the floor somewhere. And so growing up with all my family like that, it was the most beautiful thing. But like I said, I didn't realize that we were struggling, and that's why we all lived together, because it was too expensive to live apart. So we all lived together. They pulled their resources so that we could have, adequate, living, food, and all those type of things. Because it would have been really hard to do that separate. Hindsight is always 20/20. I'm looking back at it now as an adult. And so as a kid, I'm just happy that I got all my family, like everybody is within arm's reach. But my grandmother, the matriarch, she pretty much raised me and all of us, basically, because, if we're all in the house. And so forever, I always called my grandma mama, and everybody called my grandma mama, and I called my mama Shirley because I thought that was my mama, so it was really wild. But it was a beautiful time. Money was not a conversation that came easy, and you all might know that. Like, I didn't know that, when we would go to offices downtown, my grandma would take me, and we would come back with boxes that had, cheese in it, and the can of peanut butter, and what else? It was like powdered milk. And I'm just going off memory, right? Because I'm little. I'm like 4 or 5 or 6, and I remember the food stamp books, because when we moved from Winston, we wound up moving on Bradford Street, and then from Bradford Street we moved to Oliver Street, East Oliver Street. And so I remember when we moved on Oliver Street, there was a corner store that I would go to, and my grandma would give me like one brown dollar food stamp, and I would go down there, and that would be like, if she told me to go down there to get something from the corner store, she'd give me a food stamp. It's like, okay, you get you some candy or something like that with it. And that was the best thing in the world for me. Or I get me one of those papaya juices or whatever. And I had no idea, like I said, I had no idea we was on welfare at the time. Oh, I didn't know that that's what it was called, and if you were on it, it means that you were poor, and or they're considered poor or low income. And so it's one of those things where money conversations was never a topic of discussion. I never, not gonna say I never saw my grandma go to a bank, because I did see her go to a bank a couple of times. I think it was called a Signet Bank. I want to say that was the name of it. And it might have eventually became Bank of America, Nations Bank. I remember Nations Bank. But it was one of those things where we never talked about it. I seen them put their money together to pay the bills. I remember my mama asking my aunts and my uncles and my mother for money to do whatever, and that was kind of like the end of the conversation. Now me, as a kid, we only just want toys, whatever toys I could get. Like, I wanted the Cabbage Patch and the My Little Ponies and the strawberry shortcakes and that kind of thing. And I remember my grandmother getting me the first Cabbage Patch, but it wasn't the real one. And I didn't know it wasn't the real one until I went to school, and the kids told me that you got to pull down the little their little panties on the on the Cabbage Patch, and then it had a stamp on the booty, and if it didn't have the stamp, then that was fake. And so when we had short and tail, I didn't have the stamp on my doll, so mine was fake, and they picked on me for that. That was my show and tell, and I was so proud of my Cabbage Patch, my little black Cabbage Patch doll. And she had yarn hair to mimic, you know, our black hair, and I was proud until I got to school, and then the kids told me that it wasn't real. Okay, so so fast forward and thinking about that, you know, my grandmother, we shopped from a place called Value Village. I think it was on York Road too. It's called Value Village. I wonder if it's still there. If anybody that's looking at this is from Baltimore, let me know of the Value Village. It was a thrift store, and I remember this because we used to go in there so often getting my school clothes and whatever other clothes. My grandma used to get clothes. I used to get toys out of there because like she would go in and be looking at whatever she's looking at, and I would make a beeline to the back where the toys were, and that's where I was at until it was time to go. And she would always get me something, and I'm pretty sure it was dirt cheap, you know, being in the thrift store, especially in the 80s. And so I was used to wearing hand-me-downs from the thrift store. I was the only girl, so it was nobody above me that I could wear their clothes because I grew up with all boys. Like all my cousins are boys, so my grandmother had to you know, buy my clothes specifically, girl clothes, and I was such a tomboy that it really didn't matter. I hate wearing dresses and that kind of stuff. So on Easter was like the only time that I really got dressed up girly. But and she always made sure that I was really pretty because my grandma also was a evangelist, her and my mom both. It was one of those things that I did not realize that we didn't have until I got older. And when I got picked on in school for having free lunch and because, you know, back then it seemed like they wanted to make sure everybody knew you was on welfare. Like now you kind of can hide it with you know, they had the cards that look like debit cards now, like the EBT cards and stuff. But when you pulled out that food stamp book, everybody knew you got food stamps. It wasn't nothing you couldn't hide it then, you know, you couldn't. So it was a lot of insecurity around money. A lot of people wasn't talking about money, especially in my family. The first time I saw a credit card was when I got one at 18. So going, you know, just knowing that when I got into school, I always want to be like everybody else. I remember when I was in the 5th grade, it was a little girl named Hope, pretty little brown girl. And she had like the little circle braids. Her mama would braid her hair so pretty, and I just adored her. I don't know, I can't remember what Hope's last name is, but she was such a pretty brown girl. And she played the violin, and she had one of them itty bitty little ones. Like she had a small violin, because violins can come in different sizes, up to when it graduates to a viola. But so I used to play the violin because of her. She made me want to play the violin, and so she had this brand new, and I forgot what her parents did, but they was pretty well off. And so I come home and I'm like, Mama, I want to play the violin. My girl like, I ain't got no violin money. And I remember that. And so the school had a program where they had some used violins that you could rent, and it was like $20 a month. And so that was a big sacrifice, but my grandmother made that happen. Like she got me that violin. Even though it wasn't mine and we were renting it, she got that violin, and I was able to take violin from the time that I was in the kindergarten all the way up until we moved here to South Carolina. And unfortunately, I couldn't continue my lessons here because they didn't have that kind of program here in school, in the schools here like they did at Roland Park where I was at, where they actually had that as a extracurricular that you could do. And so it was just those little things that I remember. And so when I got older, and I'm, you know, my grandmother, you know, still shopping at Sky Cities and Family Dollars to get me clothes, you know, and stuff like that. When we moved down here to South Carolina, and I'm wearing Cougar no-name tennis shoes, and I'm getting picked on as a teenager now, you know, because I'm about 12 and 13, and now I'm getting picked down as a teenager because of how I'm dressed and stuff. So as soon as I turned 16, I was running to get a job. Like I was running to get a job because I wanted to look like everybody else. And so that was the start of my emotional spending. That was the very start of my emotional spending, because now I was correlating money to looking the part, being the part, and showing that I'm not really what's going on. Because I'm like, what's going on is I'm living in Section 8 apartment here in South Carolina with my grandmother, right? Because when we moved here, everybody could afford to branch out, because it's a lot, the cost of living here was a lot cheaper than in Baltimore. So I'm still Section 8. I'm still getting Medicaid. We still, under what they consider low income, and so, but I didn't want people to know that. So I started paying for my own lunch, even though I qualified for free lunch, because I didn't want people to know. Because when you go through the free lunch line, everybody know you got free lunch, and I had got kind of over that when I was in elementary school and middle school. I was kind of over that. So by the time I got to be a teenager and I'm in high school, I'm like, I'm not going through the free lunch line anymore. I'm not doing that. Even though I qualify, I'm not doing that, because I'm tired of getting picked on for not having. So by this time, I have already associated my money with material things and how other people will see me. Well, I look poor to them. So I'm buying stuff that Tommy Hilfiger, cross colors. Y'all remember cross colors from the 90s, right? All these expensive clothes just to look apart. Patrick Ewing tennis shoes. I never bought Jordans. I just don't care for Jordans. So I never had a pair of Jordans my whole life. But other tennis shoes, other Air Max, all those expensive tennis shoes from the 90s, I was on it. Like, as soon as I got a job, I was on it, and that was my only reason for getting a job. Because I had food. My grandmother made sure we had food in the house, made sure we had a roof over our head, made sure we had electricity, everything. The lights was never cut off when I was growing up. None of those things. But so I had what I needed. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. I had what I needed growing up. I might not always had what I wanted, but I always had what I needed. But when you are trying to be something that you're not, or look like you have more than what you have just because of everybody else, that started the cycle of debt for me. Because by the time I turned 18, and of course, when you turn 18, I don't know if they still do it now, because when my son turned 18, I had already opted him out of credit card offerings. But as soon as I turned 18, I got that Discover card application in the mail, and that was the first credit card I got, and that was the beginning of the debt cycle for me. That was the beginning of it. Because now, as soon as I got the $500, I went to the ATM. They sent me a pin. I went to the ATM and I got the $500 cash, not realizing that a cash advance is one of the most expensive ways to use your credit card, because interest start day one, right? It's no grace period on cash advances. So now I've started a very bad money habit, but nobody was telling me that that was bad, because there was no experience in that area in my family. Like I said, I was the very first person to have a credit card in my family. So and forever probably was the only one in my family that had a credit card. So, in my immediate family, that is. And so there was none of that. My grandmother only knew finance companies when it come to getting credit, so she took me to a finance company to help build my credit when I was like, and I don't know how that happened, but I want to say I was like 16 when she took me. And like I said, I don't know how that happened legally, because I wasn't legal to do that. But she took me to a finance company, and I was able to get this $300 loan. Now, I cringed down thinking about it, because I'm pretty sure the interest was pretty high. Then that it was a finance company. But those usually be the ones that kind of cater to the Black and brown community. You can find those all the time, just like you can find the check cashing places and the liquor stores and all that kind of stuff in the Black and brown community. And also, I grew up doing the very cusp of the crack epidemic, and I didn't know that was a whole thing until older. That also affected the economy of the Black community. Because mind you, I'm a kid growing up in this era. I'm a kid growing up. I saw the crime. That was the main reason why we moved from Baltimore down here to South Carolina, because I was barely 10 when I saw somebody lose their life right in front of my house on East Oliver Street, like literally right across the street. And there was a church that was right across the street from my house. And my grandma was like, well, we got a church across the street, so surely this neighborhood is not going to be that bad, at least my block. But nah. And so, it was a lot of drug infestation in that area. There was a playground behind my house, like a concrete slab of a playground with a couple of metal slides and some swings, but you didn't want to go out there because of all the dirty needles that was in the alleys and stuff like that. So I remember all of that, and I remember seeing the strung out women begging for money and the abusiveness from the drug dealers, and I dare to say the PIMP word that was going on right there in that facility, or where we lived at in Baltimore before we moved here. So moving to South Carolina was a lot better as far as crime. I mean, of course, crime is everywhere. So I'm not going to say when we moved here, we didn't see any of those things, because we moved into a hood here. And so, and when we moved out here, they actually called it New Jack City, but it wasn't like projects. Like, they didn't have project high rises here. Like, that wasn't a thing. But the apartments, they called that area New Jack City, and I was like, okay, and so I've always seen poverty at some level all the way up until I would say about 50, I would say about 14 is when we moved to a better Section 8 housing here in South Carolina, in my town. And it was a whole lot better. We even had central air and heat, because the apartments we lived in before, we had no air conditioning. We had to have a fan in the window. So summer times was excruciating here in South Carolina. I remember, as a kid though, it's not like how it is now, where everybody's in the house on their game and iPads and all those different things. We actually went outside and played. So as a kid, now as an adult, I wouldn't want to be in that stifling hot heat, but as a kid, I really didn't notice it. Thinking about it, I didn't notice how hot it was, with just a window fan to keep air circulating in that apartment or whatever. Going into work mode after being a teenager, I was not focused on college. I've always been focused on the check. Right. So I didn't go to college straight out of high school. I went to work in a manufacturer, in a plant here, because that's what you do. You get you a job where you can work, and hopefully you can work there for 40 years and you retire with a good pension, or 401k. 401k eventually became a thing, and that's what you do. College wasn't something that was really talked about in my family. So when I did go to work at this manufacturer, and it was a textile plant, the lady who was my supervisor, she actually told me, she said, you need to, she said, Star, you're too young. This plant is about to shut down because it's going to Honduras. Like, this is 2003. We're having this conversation. And by this time, I even got my son now. He's like 2 years old. And she's like, you need to, go ahead and go back to school, because you're young, you got your young son, and you're very smart. You don't need to be doing this kind of work for the rest of your life. You need to go back to school. So it was this white lady named Danielle, shout out to Danielle, that told me that I need to go back to school and get my degree in something that I like. And that's how I ended up getting in banking, because and getting my accounting and business degree was because of her. Because it wasn't because my grandma was big on education, but it was more or less, okay, you got your high school diploma. That's good. I was the first one to graduate with my high school diploma in my family. And then I was the first one to graduate with with a degree. And then that kind of set the standard then, because then my brother went back, which he's older than me, but he went back, and my cousin went back. And then now my son he's in his doctorate program, actually. So it was like somebody had to break that ice. And so I feel like through me, and I thank God for it, through me, that some of the generational curses that we like to use that term has moved on from my family, and we are going into a better financial footing now. None of us are where we want to be. Of course, nobody's no millionaire or nothing like that. But from where we come from, the humble beginnings that we come from, it's a way difference than when we come from. Now, a lot of things are that, especially in the Black and brown community, are systematic racism. You know, some things were designed to keep us down. You know, some things were designed to keep us down, and that's going to be another conversation, because I'm very deep into learning about the financial wealth gap that that has kept a lot of Black people, Black and brown people, from having true wealth, you know, because they keep talking about by the year 2055 that Black people are not going to have any money, any wealth, you know, true wealth, you know, not that we will be completely broke with no money, but just no wealth, nothing to pass down, no legacy to pass down to the next generation. And so when you hear those type of things, you have to understand the history behind those things. So we're going to talk about that, because I'm very interested. I look at stuff like about that all the time. And so everybody, you know, we all have a money story, and everybody's money story is going to be different. Everybody's money story is going to be different. How you see money will be different than how I see money. I still find myself emotionally spending sometimes, like now I'm back working in the bank. Like I went back to banking in November, and so I'm seeing new things, because you know I've been working for myself for like the last 2 years, so I'm going back in. I'm seeing new work outfits, because I haven't had to dress like business casual, you know, in 2 years. And so I'm trying not to fall back into those patterns that I was in when I was in banking before, of looking that part and spending unnecessary money, because it's so easy to see what other people have and you want to have it even if you don't need it. And so it can trigger. See, that's my trigger. That's my trigger, seeing what other people have and I not have it, especially when it comes to clothes, because I feel like I was very clothes insecure, and seeing I don't know why lunch boxes, you know, because like I said, I got the free lunch. So when I see somebody with a really nice lunch bag in the refrigerator, I'm like, oh, I like that bag, you know. And I bring my lunch. I do bring my lunch. I'm not eating out. So I get triggered by stuff like that because of the free lunch. You know, I got free lunch. So I get triggered. And so I know what my trigger points are. And so but I had to do the work to know what my trigger points are, to be able to say, nah, Star, that's little Star that, you know, got picked on for free lunch. That's little Star that got picked on for having welfare. That's little Star that got picked on for wearing hand-me-downs. That's little Star that got picked on for not having the real Cabbage Patch doll. So now you got to get the name brand, whatever it is, because you can't wear the knockoff, because, or you can't have the knockoff bag, or you can't have that because you know how it felt. You got picked on for having the knockoff doll. So those are my triggers. I know what my triggers are. And so it doesn't trigger me now as much because I know. But if I did not know, that's the subconscious programming. You know, our subconscious mind does things on autopilot. We have to bring our awareness to the forefront, you know, to our conscious mind, and being mindful of our triggers. So now that I'm mindful of my trigger, I'm not easily triggered. So what triggers you? What emotional thing triggers you to spend even though you don't need to? What emotional thing triggers you? Leave me a comment down in the comment section and let me know, what is it that triggers you to spend even though you know you don't have it? You're going to whip out that credit card that's already almost maxed, or you know, it's going to make you do a bad money decision. What are those triggers for you? And again, if you want to be a guest on the show and talk to me about your money story, and you don't have to show your face on camera, you can even change your name if you like. But what are your triggers? What are your triggers? Because like I said, with the Happy and Healed Money podcast, I want us to have these really deep conversations. I want us to be able to pinpoint those things, because once you pinpoint them, then you can work towards eliminating those things. Because I remember growing up, guys, where you know what they say, keeping up with the Joneses, you only had your neighborhood, school, and church. Now you have the whole world that people are trying to keep up with. You got this whole internet now, social media, TikTok, and all the other different ones that are pushing items in your face because you need this new thing, because this new thing is going to make you the best, whatever it is, right? Or you and you're seeing it all the time, and when you're seeing these commercials and these ads and all these different things, these people are living their best life. They got the best vibe, and we want that. We want whatever it is that they're on, right? And we're chasing that feeling, and we're chasing that high with our money, right? To our detriment a lot of times. Some people can afford it and some people can't, right? And so those are the kind of conversations that I want to talk about here with the Happy and Healed Money Podcast. What are those things? What are those things that are keeping us back from true financial freedom? And usually it's our money story. It's the story behind why we do what we do with our money. It's the driving force. It's kind of like when you're on a diet and you know that you're not supposed to have whatever that food is that's causing your diet to just be trash. And just sometimes you just can't help it. You just got to have it, and you got to do it. And then once you do it, you get that little rush, and then after that you feel like crap after you've done it, because you know you shouldn't have did it. And that's how the guilt and the shame and the hurt gets around our money, because we do the exact same thing with our money. We may know that we got an important bill coming up, but look at that bag. Oh my God, that bag right there is going to go so good with this, that, and whatever. And we're going to get this bag and we'll just worry about it later. So how many times you done had that conversation? Those are the things that we got to talk about here on the Happy and Healed Money Podcast. We got to heal that trigger, whatever that trigger is for you. So again, if you want to be a special guest on the Happy and Healed Money Podcast, I want you to go into the description box of this video and click on that Google form and fill that out, send that back to me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Because I have a few submissions right now that I got to reach out to. So I do want to hear your story. I do. And there's other people that need to hear your story as well. Now, I could go a whole lot deeper, but I don't want this to go too long. I could, because like I said, I mean, everybody has a money story throughout their whole life, right? Because I could go into how I got into debt. Like I got into so much consumerism debt. That's a whole episode in itself between the time I had my son and starting and working in credit union in 2007. That's a whole segment of my life. And then working in credit union all the way up until entrepreneurship, that's a whole segment. So each stage of your life, from a child to when you're a teenager, to when you are a young adult, to now I'm 46. There's other challenges, because now I'm looking towards, okay, I'm gonna be retiring probably in 20 years, and 20 years is not that far away. So am I gonna be good for retirement? So all those things, the money story never ends. It really never ends. But when we know what our triggers are and the things that make us do what we do with our credit, why we max out our credit cards when we know that that's not the right thing to do? Why do we go and get payday loans when we know that that is the worst type of credit out there, or finance company loans? Or why do we go to buy here, pay here places? Because we know we trashed our credit, just buying stuff that we probably can't even put our hand on right now. Those are all the things that I want to talk about, because those are the deep dives. Those are the things that are really hindering our progression, hindering us from having that financial freedom. That's a great buzzword, but do you really want that, right? Do you really want true financial freedom? But I want that, and I want that for you, okay? I want that for you. But guess what? It don't matter what I want, because you got to want it for yourself. If you don't want it for yourself, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Star wants. I want it for myself, and that's why this podcast is going to be therapeutic just for me if it's not for y'all, because it's going to continue to help me learn and grow, and be able to be a good stewardess of my money and the resources that God gives me every time I get a check, or every time somebody books a consultation with me, or every time somebody buys a candle from my I still have my business from St. Purpose. And so those type of things, how can I be a good stewardess so that I can live a legacy? I want to leave a legacy for my son and for his children. And let's try to close that wealth gap one family at a time, especially as Black and brown people. Okay. All right. So guys, thank you so much. I don't know how long this is. I'm looking at on the thing. I think it says 33 minutes. So hopefully it's not too long. And if you like my money story, let me know in the comments. And again, I am so excited about bringing this to the Star Carter Personal Finance YouTube channel. I am so excited about this. This is so near and dear to my heart. You just don't know. I'm gonna see you guys in the next episode.